Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Rabbi Hart Walker. What do you get when you combine more than 10 years of talk radio experience with a conservative Christian, historical constitutionalist who has an unbridled opinion, rapier wit, and a gift for the uncommon and little-known historical facts about America? That can only describe one person, and he's not only a friend of many years, host of heartofamerica.net, and the author of Unknown America, Myths and Little-Known Oddities About the Greatest Nation on Earth. That person is Michael Hart, who regularly appears here on the third Monday of every month at the 10 o'clock hour. Michael, so great to see you here live in studio.
Absolutely.
What a blessing it is to have you here in town. You and I have enjoyed many, many years sitting across from each other with a microphone, just talking about the issues of the day, talking about the things that trouble us as conservatives, as Christians, the things that we watch in the headlines and the news that really call for a much louder response than I think at any other time in history. We should be the loudest, and we are absolutely our quietest. What's going on?
Where do we begin? There's been so many things to talk about over the course of the last couple of years, and as you know, that you and I have been having these conversations on the air and off the air, Rabbi, for the better part of it's been 11, 12 years now. As far as why people on the right are so tepid or quiet in this case, I really, I struggle with it. I truly do, and I think that Donald Trump, for all of his bombacity, has kind of change the playing field, if you will, just a bit, and encourage people to come out and speak their mind with a little more vocality. But in the case of Trump, for example, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a few moments, sometimes it can be a little too bombastic for my taste. But as far as what's going on, I think that it's kind of like, when you see that accident in the interstate, or people that are drawn to horror movies, mm-hmm. They like to hear about the detrimental. They like to hear about the death and the destruction and the despair, and anything that is encouraging, such as the good news of the Lord Jesus Christ, for example, is something which gets pushed to the wayside.
Even the body is quiet about the Messiah. Church attendance, lowest level in 100 years. Church movement, lowest level. We've talked before about the Black Robe Regiment being the fright of England in the War of Independence. That the control of the community lay in the hand of the orator, the pastor. He was the one that had the soapbox. He was the one that was standing up on these issues of right and wrong, justice and injustice. And there are injustices. There's no question in this country. It's a country filled with injustices. But I'm seeing issues like this border issue and this entitlement program that an illegal alien, illegal immigrant can come into this country and receive benefits greater than the average American citizen, and giving preferential treatment, and then having somebody come to their defense to protect the fact that they have rights. According to my Constitution, you get your rights granted to you when you become a citizen. And anything less than citizen has rights associated with it. So green card holder has rights. Visa holder has certain rights. But when you have no visa, you have no green card, you have no passport, you have no citizenship, what rights do you have? And we're writing checks to these people, feeding them and clothing them. And listen, my family came to this country. I know what it's like in the immigrant story, but I also know the right way to do it, and this is not being done the right way. And the veterans are the ones that are being vocal and saying, listen, we lost an arm. Okay, fighting for this country, and I get less benefits for losing my arm and less medical care and less income than somebody who sneaks a family over the border of this country. It's ridiculous, and it's gotten to the point it's ridiculous. It's indefensible But yet they found in this Nancy Pelosi and this Chuck Schumer to rally around this idea that America should be a nation with no borders, that we should be the land of the free and the home of the brave. It doesn't work that way. A country without borders is not a country.
Right. Well, it never worked that way. And it's the same thing with why are the penalties for terminating the life of a puppy greater than that of terminating the life of a fetus? And so there, why do you need a permit to fish, but you don't need a permit or ID to vote? There's this intellectual phenomenon or anomaly, if you will, that just makes absolutely no sense. And some of the things we talk about from a historical perspective on my program are things like the Cloward-Piven strategy, which was designed to overwhelm the system. A lot of people think that the immigrants are being allowed to come into the country because the Democrats need the vote. I think that's part of it, but Democrats, by their very nature, and they've been this way historically, and a lot of politicians are the same way, they need to have an issue to solve. They need to have something to overcome. They need to justify their existence. And without the chaos, the mayhem, and the anarchy on our southern border, they lose that aspect to it. It's the same thing with Roe versus Wade. As far as the abortion issue is concerned, they need that fight to validate, because it goes back to the same thing of if the Democrats lose on the next election, you might lose your rights to female health care, whatever the case may be. So not only do they nurture these problems, they gin them up very frequently, and it's all done for political expediency.
The problem is that here we're about to hit a debt ceiling. See, there's the fiscal aspects of these kind of programs. I'm older than you. I'm 67. I'm a Social Security recipient. I paid into that program starting in 1965 is when I began. So that's almost 60 years of paying into that program. This was presented as almost a forced investment, forced savings plan. Your employer matched a certain amount, so it was really the model of the modern day 401k was what Medicare and Social Security were designed to be, so that every American could work and reach a point in their life where they didn't have to work anymore. They would have at least a certain amount of income that would last them. That was their money.
Right.
It was entrusted to the government, and it wasn't for the funding of the government, and it was supposed to be to receive whatever the savings bond return was, or whatever the treasury bond return was. It was tied to a number. They've now lumped that into an entitlement programs and looking at what we're entitled to. That's not an entitlement program. You don't work, you don't pay into Social Security. So what we did was we established these programs like Medicaid. Okay? So you don't work, you don't have Social Security, you get Medicaid for a period of time if you're living at a percentage, 138% of the poverty level. In America, you're eligible for that, and that is assistance till you get on your feet. Okay? That is a generous, benevolent country. I don't know of other countries that subsidize non-working people. Even the Bible says the laborer, the worker, is worth his wage. You don't work, you don't eat. But we have a program here in America where we've done that. Social Security, SSI, for a disability, for a hardship situation. We found a way within our system. But all these programs, you can't have every one of them. And the denial of these borders being used to traffic drugs, sex trafficking, the number of people who have been convicted of crimes in American courts who are here illegally and have not left, or who did not show up for their sentencing after they were found guilty of whatever crime it was. Right. We're now funneling the largest free reign of crime since the Gambinos, since the mobs. It's absurd, and there's no outcry. Maybe it's because we're here in Alabama, we don't have a southern border. We don't stop people from Florida from coming in, or from Louisiana from coming in. But the states that have these borders, they're saying we want to be sanctuary cities. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. Okay, San Francisco is where we were first introduced to the wonderful thing called HIV and AIDS.
Right.
We're now being introduced to cholera, to bubonic plague, to living conditions which are beneath the human condition. How can you possibly justify having people live in human waste? And you're going to open the door to provide to someone who's not a citizen of this country 3 meals a day, food, clothing, shelter, and a stipend when you have American citizens that are living in feces. It doesn't make any sense. Why are they not fighting for those rights? Why are they not saying, close the border until we get our domestic situation? But they're looking for funding above and beyond to raise the debt ceiling of this country, to put us further in debt, to fund people coming here through third world countries only to advance the cause of crime. They say, oh, well, they're wonderful working people. I'm sure that many of them are, but the statistics show that the highest rate of criminal activity is taking place in this particular demographic. Why aren't we crying out about it? Why aren't we standing there locking our arms and blocking the border? Why are we having our ICE agents who are federal employees being attacked and there's no defense?
You and I have talked about this so many times, and it really is the pro forma of what I like to do with my program, my books, my website, is it shows a complete lack of the understanding of history. The way not just the Founding Fathers intended for the Constitution to be utilized, but also the experiments, whether we want to go to Ellis Island or we're going to talk about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. The Democrats in particular, but the progressive ideology demands that people are not necessarily just indoctrinated, but that they are completely devoid of the reality of the past. We simply don't learn from the past. And you know, George Santayana spoke to this as well. But not just American history. Let's look at the French statesman Frederick Bastiat, for example. He wrote about in the book called The Law about legalized plunder of government as it related to France 200 plus years ago. We didn't learn anything from those lessons, and we don't, because at the end of the day, it's all about power and money. And you and I have talked about this so many times before, that the Democrats' progressive ideology does not care about the middle class. Because isn't it interesting to note, Rabbi, that if you look at places like Russia or China, where you have communism installed, you still have wealth, you still have billionaires, you still have people of privilege. It's the middle class that pays that price. It's not a matter of bringing the lower class up. It's a matter of diluting the middle class with the lower class for the purposes of not only political expediency, but power and profit. And most people simply cannot see that because their policies sound so wonderful on the surface. Yeah, of course, we're going to take in, young kids that have been separated from their families, while simultaneously, within a 9-iron of this very studio, you've got United States veterans of war sleeping under an interstate bridge. But why do they take care of them? Because they're already here. For one thing, they've got to import more people to overwhelm the system, to create the votes, because if people think for one moment that this is an aspect of some kind of generosity or tolerance or a humanitarian aid, they're crazy, because we do not take care of our own. We have become a country in this nation that we are more concerned with the dilution of the American ideology, again for political expediency, because this is something which is very hard for people to understand. We look at our politicians, and as Americans, as Christians, we want to believe the better angels of people's nature, as Abraham Lincoln pointed out. We don't understand the sin, the degradation, the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world. The bottom line is there are people in this country in positions of power, whether they be Pelosi or whoever, that have their own loyalty, their fealty is to themselves or their worldview. You know, so Obama spoke about being a citizen of the world as opposed to a citizen of America. So you've got to diminish the value of America to justify that position. Because at the end of the day, there's greater wealth, there's greater power and influence in being a citizen of the world than there is being a United States or an American, a United States citizen. They know that. That's that exploitation. And that's very hard for a lot of people to swallow, because why would my parent, my beneficiary, why would he not be protective of me? Well, in this case, they're not, because of their own desire for greed and wealth and avarice, if you will.
You know, let's take a look at I'm going to throw this out there. You have O.J. Simpson, multimillionaire, okay, goes to prison, okay, loses hundreds of millions of dollars in a lawsuit, okay, to a family that in a civil case. You have the Epsteins, you have the Bill Cosbys, you have all this wealth. We're talking about sanctions, Iran, sanctions against Iranian funds, freezing assets of Iranians. Why not take this money and use it to support? Why not make part of our criminal justice system that says that these wealthy people that have navigated their way around and gotten away with all these things, okay, that are now found criminally guilty, that we seize their assets and it goes into a fund that takes care of these poor, impoverished people, as opposed to putting it on the backs of the citizens of this country, which makes it something that cannot be sustainable. It's not sustainable in Venezuela. Look at that country. Look at Venezuela. Socialism in Venezuela has taken an OPEC nation, one of the world's largest oil producers, and turned it into an impoverished dictatorship where the people are suffering. If you take a look at Iran, the people are suffering. If you take a look at Gaza, okay, it's not because the Palestinians are being oppressed, it's because the leadership are living in multi-million-dollar palaces the same way they are in every other country around the world, where the dictator has this huge compound and the poor person's on the street with nothing, and this wealth is it's being sucked into. You and I respect examples, right? Nancy Pelosi tax return millions of dollars. Joe Biden,
right,
okay, $15 million. Okay? Why will Joe Biden say, okay, listen, we don't need $15 million. Does anybody need $15 million?
I certainly don't.
I don't know what I would do with $15 million. If somebody wants to send us $15 million, we'll send it to India to build orphanages for the 30 million orphans living on the Ganges River. We'll be happy to receive your $15 million contribution and designate it for support of people coming into Israel, support of people coming into these nations, support of people coming into America. But let's take care of our veterans that fought the war that got us here, that got our freedom. And it's not that we should forget about the underprivileged. We were persecuted. We were run out of our homes because of the Cossacks. They took what belonged to us that we earned. They put us into communities, and then they took those communities away from us, and we had nowhere to go, and so we had to leave, and so we had to find sponsors. My grandparents were sponsored to come to America. There was a family, groups of families that sponsored them and brought them here. And that's a wonderful program. And if there are families, if there are communities that want to sponsor bringing people over here, the government says they have a system that says if you have a family waiting for you and they want to bring you over, bring them over. There's a way to do that. Mm-hmm. But this free-for-all is absurd.
Well, it truly is, but it's a great political narrative. But you asked in your opening statements a moment ago, why does this go on? Why are people not outraged? Why are we not hearing them screaming from the rooftop? And I can give you a 3-word answer that I believe in all of my heart. They're all guilty. And I mean on the right as well. Now, maybe not, we're seeing some things obviously change with Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, this institutionalized, political career politician, that was never the intent. You know, it's so interesting. A couple of days ago, Rosie O'Donnell, of all people, when it was announced that Ivana Trump might be thinking about running for president, was talking about how you should have, you know, they had no political experience. They shouldn't be running for office. What have they ever done? The Constitution was designed that way. The House of Representatives was meant to be a body of people that had no experience. You come, you serve, you do your 2 years, your 4 years, your 6, pardon me, and you take it back to your plantation. That's not the way we do things today. So we have this new corporate institutionalized aspect of government that they want to protect. That's one of the reasons why I believe this whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein, it's much deeper than most people realize. It's much more involved, it's much more insidious than most people realize. And I think a lot of people, you know, Donald Trump, when he was elected, Rabbi, made a comment about draining the swamp. I think the swamp's a lot deeper and a lot broader than even he realized, because inside the Beltway, there's an awful lot of guilt there because we've been very complacent. You know, over the years, whether it's because of the media, whether it's because we're dealing with our own mortgages, our kids, you know, their education, whatever the case may be, making a living and living the American dream. Most people simply do not want to participate because at the end of the day, it's hard. It means voting. It means going to political rallies. It means, you know, one of the things that has always irritated me, and you as clergy, I know you appreciate this. There is nothing, in my opinion, more atrocious than to go to your church or your synagogue, have that epiphany, that cathartic moment, and leave it there. That's an abomination to the Lord. We're called to witness. We're also called to witness politically speaking. And if there's something that you've learned or something that you've heard and you're not sharing it with your family or your co-workers or your church members, then you're doing that system a disservice as well. And you have a lot of people that, you know, particularly on the, you know, on the Judeo-Christian side of things, they don't want to offend. We're going to be passive. We're going to be passionate. We don't want to start a fight. Well, we see in the Bible, and particularly as it relates to the Lord, that is, there's a not to go all Kenny Rogers on you, but sometimes you got to fight when you're a man, or in this case, a patriot. And a lot of people simply do not see that. Somebody else has got this. Somebody else is going to take care of it. We are at the tipping point. And, you know, we learned earlier today that all these ex-politicos that work in the Clinton administration and for Barack Obama are now populating the corporate hallways of Facebook, the arbiter of the greatest amount of data and information that any news outlet has ever seen, crafting the narrative. Who's going to stand up to that? Because it's hard. It hurts. It's difficult. I got to watch Dancing with the Stars.
America may be changing, but we're at no different a point than we were 248 years ago when we were fighting oppression, we were fighting tyranny, we were fighting against something that was not right, and people were standing up and doing something about it. The passivity that we see now, it's almost a resignation. There's nothing that can be done about it. You can't do anything about it. That this system is fatally flawed. You're going to have this either in 2020 is going to be a Republican sweep, or it's going to be the end of this democratic republic as we know it, and it will be forever changed, and the America that you and I both know will no longer exist.
Right.
This fear of adding one or two more conservative seats to the Supreme Court, which was the huge issue of the 2018 or 2016 campaign of, well, there goes Roe v. Wade. And we're talking about our population not even being able to recognize who's a citizen and who's not a citizen.
Right. Right.
4th of July, I did a 4-minute recording, an op-ed that just said, we cannot give, even at the local level, voting rights because the ballot, you went to the polls in November, on that same ballot that there was senators I think it was state senators. There were some federal positions on there. There was state positions on there. There were local positions. They only print one ballot. So if you only have the right to vote on what's on page 3, they're not going to just give you page 3 because you have this one idea. You're in the room, you get the ballot.
Right. Right.
So, somebody began arguing with me and saying they're not trying to say that an illegal immigrant should have federal voting rights. Voting rights, period, are issued at the state level. Okay, that's what you don't go to Washington to go get. You don't go through the passport office. Okay, you go to the local voters registration. Okay, so if you can vote in a local election, you can vote in any election. You can walk into the polls. The polling place is the access you're being given to. And I think people have missed this tremendously, that this idea that's being promoted saying let people vote in their local communities. If you can get into the polling place, you can get to the ballot. If you can get to the ballot, you can get to every part. They don't segment it out. They don't hand out different ballots. And it's a naivete. It's a foolishness that we're trying to fight for a right for somebody that won't even allow us to count them, so that we can figure out how we set up our House of Representatives, House of distribution to how many state representatives for the U.S. House of Representatives this district is going to get. That's how the Constitution was set up. That was how it was set up when Jethro came to Moses and said, listen, one person's trying to handle too many. You need to have representatives of tens, hundreds, thousands. That's the system. We're talking with Michael Hart during this hour that we speak with Michael on the Michael Hart Hour, this time every month on the third Monday of the month at the 10 o'clock hour. When we talk about these heated, and they are heated, they're passionate, political issues that are being contended with at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. And we're going to take a break. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about these tweets that Donald Trump sent out over the weekend about telling these 4 representatives to go back to the countries that they came from. 3 of them are American born, 1 of them is not. But even opening up that narrative at the presidential level galvanized, I think, a whole body of Democrats that maybe should not be galvanized and should be taken on. And hopefully there's something we can do about it. We'll talk about that when we return from this break. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of 2 Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Rabbi Eric Walker. We're talking with Michael Hart during the Michael Hart Hour. You can find Michael Hart right here on Revealing the Truth on the 3rd Monday of every month at 10 a.m. You can also find him at Michael Hart of America.net for the Michael Hart podcast and information about where he appears. Also, his book, Unknown, are seemingly unimportant, but yet when you take a look at what's going on all around the nation, you're finding more and more similarities popping up in the pages of this book with what's going on around the country. So our president this weekend, excuse me, sends out a tweet that tells 4 of our congressmen to go back to where they came from.
Right.
3 of them are American, 1 of them are not. And what seemed to be the Pelosi war between AOC and Pelosi seems to be now they're in agreement to take on the president, and he's galvanized what was going to be looking like the breakup of the Democratic Party.
Spoke about this earlier today, and although I am a right-wing Christian conservative and a Trump supporter, I have, over the years, Rabbi, the last couple of years, made the point that Donald Trump tweets a little bit too much. And sometimes when the battle is won, you have to walk away from the battle. I personally think Donald Trump is going to win in 2020 in a landslide. But we had the Democrat Party on the ropes. This was a tweet, I understand red meat, but this is a tweet, in my opinion, that will bear no fruit. When you consider the fact that you have Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, I realize is in the Senate, but you've got the Democrat hierarchy. You have this one representative from Missouri with the last name of Clay, calling Pelosi out as well. One Democrat insider says she was a complete, total fraud. Ilhan Omar's approval ratings came out today, as did Pelosi's. Omar's at 9%. I'm not Pelosi, I'm sorry. Ocasio-Cortez. Cortez is at 22%. Now, all of a sudden, you've taken this situation where Donald Trump has created fertile ground for healing between the caucus and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, if you will. Ill-timed, ill-advised, unnecessary. And do I think it was racist or bigoted? No, I don't, because my family's from New York. I know people that know Donald Trump personally. I know for a fact that he, by our definition, is not racist or bigoted. But at the end of the day, I can see how somebody would draw that conclusion based upon the fact, as you point out, 3 of these women are United States senators. They are infantile, they are trite, they are uninformed, they're not terribly intelligent, certainly not stateswomen. This particular tweet, in my opinion, serves no political purpose whatsoever other than chum the waters of the right, which were thoroughly chummed, and it has disrupted an opportunity like we've never seen in this country in recent memory, and that is the destruction of the Democrat Party from within.
It's unfortunate that the New Yorker in Donald Trump is not able to be tempered just a little bit. And the changing of the guard with Sarah Sanders leaving, a new press secretary coming in won't have any positive impact in that area. He's pretty much entrenched in doing what he wants and saying what he wants. My eyes are kind of on what's going to happen with the new Attorney General, with what's going to happen with this new investigation, with Iceberg and all the people that can be implicated. I think that the Mueller testimony coming up next week, I guess, or 2 weeks now, I don't even understand why they're continuing to go down that path, because the country is desperately in need of some legislation. And while they're spending all these times in committee doing all these things that have no impact whatsoever on the benefit of America, they can actually be debating, looking for where they're going to find funding. If you want to fund a better immigration system, okay, that should be the dialogue. That should be the debate on the floor of the House. It should not be questioning Mueller a third time on an issue that's already been resolved. Help me understand what's behind this. Okay? You beat this horse to death. Okay? Everybody who's been involved with it says that there was no Russian collusion. Okay? Was there Russian involvement? Of course there was Russian involvement. There was Israeli involvement. There was French involvement. There was Peruvian involvement. If there's somebody who lives and works inside the Beltway, they were involved. They have an agenda. Were the insurance companies complicit? Yes. Were the drug companies complicit? Yes. Did everybody have an agenda? The answer is yes. Did you make a campaign contribution? My goodness, you were involved in trying to affect the outcome of this campaign. That's the American way, is that you have campaign contributions. Ross Perot made that eminently clear. Okay? Upon his deathbed, he writes 2 checks, okay, for $100 million, okay, for the re-election of Donald Trump. Okay? So Donald Trump is going to go into 2020 with a war chest of somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion. And they're dragging Mueller out. Crazy. This is the definition. This is the exact definition. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the result to be different.
Sure. Well, as you point out, the Russians have been meddling ever since Lenin got the Romanovs out of power. So that's nothing new. I mean, even Kamala Harris came out a couple of days ago about Russian bots are now trying to infiltrate her campaign. So, as you point out, historically speaking, internationally speaking, there have always been countries and private individuals, bad actors, if you will, trying to influence the election. But why Mueller? Why now? Why again? It's all they've got. It's just all they've got. And they have so invested in this particular storyline that they're hoping some of it eventually sticks. The problem is that when you, not to go back to belabor the thing with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, whenever Trump goes out and he tweets these things, it reinvigorates the desire, because now you got this Ariana Presley screaming that she wants to impeach Trump, which a bad tweet is not an impeachable offense, of course. But the point is that the Democrats simply have nothing on the man. But they are convinced, because they're guilty as they can possibly be in so many different aspects, that there's got to be a there. And whether or not that there is impeachable, probably not. But at the end of the day, they're so heavily invested in it that story has got to bear some kind of fruit. And it is not, it cannot, it will not. But right now, at this late date, as we're seeing Joe Biden, who came out over the weekend saying that he would not apologize for deportations, nor would he have a policy of deportation or paring back the deportations in the future. The entire party is quivering and quaking to find its footing. And right now, the only foundational stone that they have is the Mueller report, and they're going to beat it to death because at the end of the day, Rabbi, you and I pay attention to this. Your listeners pay attention to this. But the great unwashed, what they hear is, well, they're bringing Mueller back out again. There must be something there. So they are dependent upon the ignorance of the American voter. Is there something there? Of course there's not. But again, it's all they've got.
My hope is that while they're doing all this, that Bill Barr is putting together the case against Comey, putting together Strzok and all the parties, these falsified FISA warrants, these investigations that were going on, that maybe what we expected Jeff Sessions, we thought might be doing behind the scenes, which apparently he wasn't. Apparently he was as ineffective as it appears that he was. I don't understand how that happened. I don't understand how Jeff Sessions wound up becoming the greatest non-factor in a place that was a cesspool of corruption, that somebody who successfully prosecuted as an attorney would all of a sudden not. Bill Barr announced that he was going to recuse himself and then decided, nope, I'm not going to recuse myself. There's no reason for me to recuse myself from this Jeffrey Epstein situation. There's so many people implicated, and maybe that's this Mueller thing that it's got to happen on the 27th or the 24th, whichever the 27th, I believe, or whichever date they've moved it to. That ends that narrative so that the new narrative can start, and they'll have enough where they can start bringing out names of people who are being implicated, and that they can get a grand jury together. They can get a special, I don't know if they're going to do a special prosecutor or if the Department of Justice is going to do this themselves, right, which is what they get paid to do.
Well, there's also the other aspect of whether or not, from a strategic perspective, are the Democrats trolling Donald Trump? As we get closer and closer to yet another testimony from Mueller, is he going to go all Twitter happy and put something out that implicates him or creates a soundbite that they can use against him? Because there's no way, because he's got the history of it, there's no way he's not going to tweet something out as we get closer and closer to that particular testimony. And I think to a degree, they're depending on that. They're dependent because Donald Trump has proven if you kick him, he's going to bite. And I think that they know this, that they just keep doubling down that maybe, just maybe, he'll give us that kernel that we can hang around his neck, because it doesn't matter if it's truthful. We saw this with Kavanaugh. We saw this in part with Roy Moore here in the state of Alabama. It's the accusation that works, not the reality. And if they can somehow get him to imply that there's any veracity to the accusation, and he'd be fertile ground for doing that, then that's a victory for them.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because in the Kavanaugh situation, they had so much ammunition on his accuser. They had so much that they could have gone after her and just eviscerated her, and they chose to back away so that they didn't make it appear that they were going after her because there was some credibility, that they were trying to silence her. So they just put it out there that her testimony wasn't credible, and they left it that way. That should be a valuable lesson learned. That statement alone took that new book, and put it number one on Amazon because people wanted to know. That's that inquiring mind wants to know, well, what did you really have on her? Now they show that she was this philandering playgirl in high school, and that she was the party doll that everybody had statements about, and that no one would corroborate her testimony, and it was all completely made up. And they didn't use any of that in discrediting her. They took the line that just said, that never happened, I was never there, and repeated it over and over again. It's a lesson learned, but will it be applied?
I doubt it, because it goes back to the original conversation that you and I had today about this passivity that I just do not understand when it comes to the Democrats over the last 100 years or so, Rabbi, have demonstrated a willingness to weaponize the crisis, to weaponize the rhetoric, to weaponize the accusation. Republicans, for whatever the reason, are just not willing to do that. Now, in that regard, Donald Trump's been somewhat of a breath of fresh air. But at the end of the day, there are so many things here that we could have employed, that we could have brought to bear, that we simply never did. And I'm at a loss. I would love to be able to give you an example. I would love to be able to give you a rationale. But I simply cannot, because, when somebody is wounded or an animal is wounded, typically we come out with everything we've got. It's a matter of survival. We just can't seem to get to that point. You have people like Jason Chavez and Trey Gowdy and so many of the others that seem to be so bulldogish, but the more they push, then eventually we have these two young, vibrant congressmen that really should have had long and storied political careers take a backseat. Why? What's happened there? There's something going on behind the scenes that's causing this fear and this lack of rationale in the Republican Party that prohibits them from being as aggressive in these attacks as I think they should be.
I can't imagine what it is that they have, but it sounds like they have something, or if they don't have anything, that they have the fear that there's something that will be brought out and is false, and as contrived as the Russian story is, will they have that same contrived story about them, and then their families are going to be torn apart, as Kavanaugh tells a story about the effect and the impact that it had on his own family. Sure. And what a committed public servant this is that says, I'm willing to pay the price for this scrutiny and for these false accusations. The issues are, Washington is corrupt, and the corruption is it's clearly in the spotlight. If they can't get Hillary Clinton on 30-something thousand deleted emails, maybe they can get the Clintons because of their Epstein affiliation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Somehow or other, this family's got to pay the price. Here, another Arkansas state senator, winds up dead, okay, who's looking into improprieties. Okay. It makes the news, and that's it. Okay. No major investigation, no seeing whether there's a connection. This sounds like the Clinton mob. That this is the last vestige of the Cosa Nostra. This is the last stand of maybe this is the one world government, the whole conspiracy of the head of it is Bill Clinton with his wife as his spokesperson, conniving and conspiring with Vladimir Putin and the world powers that be, and we're going to see this come out in this one world government format, and that the Pope's involved somehow as well. These are the conspiracies we're dealing with. But the fact that these junior senators and junior Congress people are getting so much airtime it just says that the National Enquirer is still the leading publication in America. It's read more than the Bible.
Right. Right.
It's read more than the Constitution. People get it now through social media, but it's nothing more than the National Enquirer, and they just want the dirt and gossip on everybody. That's what they live for. That's what they want to talk about, the real issues, the real change. Do they really care about the plight of the southern border? Do they really care about drug smugglers and MS-13? MS-13 was Jeff Sessions' big push, that that was going to be his big claim to fame. Before all that started, I didn't know anything about MS-13. Okay, and so it's a gang. I knew about the Bloods and the Crips. They were a gang.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They still exist. So is this roster of it's like the worst lineup, which was the worst lineup for the Republican Party that they started out with 4 years ago, with this roster of 20 or 25, and they're going, how'd that person get up there? How'd that person get up there? This is the best that America has to produce? Is Joe Biden the spokesperson for Hair Club for Men?
I think a big part of the problem that you have here is, going back to Kavanaugh for just a moment, is the realization that by a lot of potential candidates that they would probably become eviscerated if they stepped out onto that platform. There are so many people now that have already been pre-eviscerated, Biden being one of them, Kamala Harris being. That's why they're coming out and talking about their days of smoking dope. Now Beto O'Rourke came out over the weekend, and his family owned slaves, 4 or 5 generations ago. So they're kind of projecting this stuff out. And so, it's a situation where I just don't think enough Americans really pay attention to what's going on in the world. They don't want to hear it, Rabbi. They just don't want to hear it. Some years ago, I had the opportunity, in a couple of different times, of interviewing Paula Jones, the accuser of Bill Clinton. And there was that whole case about Danny Williams, the love child of Bill Clinton. And I asked Jones, I said, do you believe this is really his son? And her response to me on the air was, Michael, yeah, that's his son. He's got kids all over this state. People in Arkansas know about the kind of backwoods or hillbilly mafia that family really was. Why is nobody dealing with it? Why are we not pointing those things out? Because most people are not going to believe it. Most people want to be lied to. Most people do not care what's really going on. Because I care about it, I have to admit that it's true. And a lot of people simply cannot deal with immigration or human trafficking or the opioid crisis, you name it. They don't want to have to deal with it, because at the end of the day, there's food on the table. We got Dancing with the Stars coming on. I got to get the kids to soccer practice, and it doesn't affect me.
I guess we're going to find out that if something isn't done about this border situation, because the government's at the point now where we've got 4,000 ICE employees there on the border. If there is an overt military engagement, they're going to have one choice and one choice only, and that's to lock the border down, close the border. There's not going to be a war on with Mexico, okay, of somebody firing cannon fire going over into sovereign Mexico without there being the potential for a border war.
Right.
So the only way you can do it is what they've done with Gaza, all right, and that is to shut the border down, move everybody away from it, and deal with it from a standpoint of drones, and just keep the people back away. When that happens, and it will happen, we're heading in that direction, that there's going to be, these people are armed and dangerous, and it's going to be put to the point where it will hit a boiling point. Right? Then America is going to be aware, because we'll be looking at, there's only 2 countries that border the United States, Canada and Mexico.
Right.
That's it. So if we don't get this thing right, if we don't get it solved, right, we have a crisis on our hands that are going to go far past the 2020 elections. They're going to impact generations to come. Our education system can't handle it. Our Social Security system can't handle it. Our community system, our budget can't handle it. And it has nothing to do with trade, has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that, are you a sovereign nation? Are you not a sovereign nation? And are you going to protect your borders? Every nation of the world has borders.
And they're watching us to see how we respond.
That's exactly right. All right, we've been talking with Michael Hart during the Michael Hart Hour here on Revealing the Truth. We meet with Michael once a month on the third Monday of every month at the 10 a.m. hour. You can catch Michael's podcast at heartofamerica.net. And you need to listen in and get a copy of his book, Unknown America, Myths and Little Known Oddities About the Greatest Nation on Earth. Michael, always great to have you on the show.
My friend.
Good to see you. God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.